Okay, so that was the general overview. Yeah, staffing is a very broad concept. Here in today's session, we will focus primarily on recruitment and selection. So under recruitment, I understand more the idea of attraction, how to attract people to apply for your company, and then selection would be that among the applicants, the people who have applied, then you will screen and filter and select then the final candidates for the jobs. So what are some of the main factors affecting global staffing? That's the question here for our subsection on global staffing. So what are important factors? What do you need to consider when you would like to hire new people for a multinational corporation? So here we have an overview of many different variables that are all very important. Here, maybe you can just have a look and let it sink in. So we have different global staffing approaches, and that is very often determined by multiple factors. Yeah? And some of them are also interrelated. And some of the factors we've talked about here in this lecture. Yeah? Think about MNC strategy, global strategy. Yeah? We talked about, I think, 2 lectures ago. And global strategy also should be aligned. Yeah? That was also the idea before. Strategy and HR should be aligned, should be very well coordinated to make sense. A very simple idea is you want to grow, you need to hire people. In terms of global strategy, we will make some more connections in a moment. Then we have social culture considerations, internationalization, situational factors, government. Government has very often a very important influence. It's part of the business environment. It's always government regulations. And where do we have it? I think also cultural aspects, social cultural considerations. Yeah, so the business environment, so whenever you think of international business, international HR, it's important to be aware and consider the business environment. Yeah, there are many factors, but very often, particularly also in HR, we think of regulatory, so laws, regulations, and then the cultural framework. But in addition, we also have some individual organizational considerations, particularly when thinking of multinational corporations, or also specific to international business experience in one specific market, and how you develop then your talent over time. Okay, so let us look into each of these factors in more detail. So the first one, global strategy or multinational corporation business strategy. So we talked about that, I think, roughly a week ago when we talked about global strategy and human resource management. Here we have some kind of a matrix, a figure, where we have on the vertical axis global integration. To what extent we have high level, so everything same, global standardization versus low, no standardization. Rather, we have some kind of local responsiveness here. From high to low, meaning low, no adjustment, everywhere the same, whereas compared to high adjustment, high degree of localization corresponding to polycentric orientation. Remember our strategy lecture. And here we plot again here these different approaches in ethnocentric. We know best, Americans know best, wherever American companies are, they do the American way, just for example. And then the opposite would be the polycentric approach, very often also related with the multi-domestic strategy, meaning high degree of localization. Romans, no. In Rome, do as the Romans. So you always localize, high degree of localization. And then we have a regiocentric, where it's organized by regions, Asia, Europe, America, and so forth. And then geocentric, where you try to consider all the aspects and get the best out of global and local standards, somewhat also related to the transnational strategy. So depending on the strategy, also you have corresponding HR, staffing. So planning as well as staffing. And here you have an overview for ethnocentric and for the different approaches. I think that is fairly obvious. So the ethnocentric approach, very strongly driven by headquarters. So the main source of talent would be parent country nationals. If it's an American company, it means American expats, American managers. And you would also then send these American managers, if need be, to foreign subsidiaries. because everywhere it should be run in the American way. And the way to achieve that would be to have Americans run the business and then also help these managers to transfer their knowledge to foreign countries. So you have many American top managers, expats, and so forth. Or a typical example would be Japan. Japanese companies are very often run by Japanese managers, who then also run their operations overseas. That has all kinds of advantages if you combine that with a global strategy, because you can control it very easily. People speak same language, can easily communicate, same understanding, and then they can easily then also transfer, not easily, but the idea is to transfer the best practices and the knowledge and the cultural values to the foreign countries and the foreign subsidiaries, and then you will develop then your people from your own country. Japanese companies usually have Japanese executives, Korean companies have Korean executives, and still American companies are mostly run by Americans. Germany has changed quite a bit. So if you look into the CVs of the top managers in Germany, you have 20-30% foreigners now. Still, as a German, it's still somewhat ethnocentric, but much less so than in the past. If you're then, that would be, if you're not from that country, then you're disadvantaged because the core talent comes from the parent, from the home country of that organization very often. So some of the associated disadvantages are very often then higher cost. It's more expensive because that system also relies on the assumption you have to coordinate and control the whole multinational corporation, meaning you need to dispatch expats from your headquarters to foreign countries to control these foreign subsidiaries, so all to integrate it, and that would result in cost. Also, that will severely limit your talent pool. If particularly you have a small country. America is very big. Japan is also relatively large, so there are many people available. But if you're a small country, think of Switzerland. Switzerland has a few million people, and they have so many excellent and globally successful companies. And many of the Swiss companies anyway, they have a global strategy, transnational strategy, different strategies. But even if they had this more ethnocentric approach, they cannot find enough Swiss people to run the show. So they need to rely, they need to open up. And by necessity, they need to hire also executives from other countries. And small countries that have many big successful companies, they need to rely on also be more open and also open up to non-parent country nationals to assume important roles in the corporations. Then the next approach will be the polycentric, or in terms of global strategy, that would be multi-domestic strategy, so a high degree of localization. How do you achieve that in terms of staffing? And the answer is very simple. You hire locals. When in Spain, you hire Spanish managers, also in key positions. When in Germany, German managers. When in Argentina, Argentinian managers, and so forth. You would hire host country nationals. Because that has a huge advantage. You can really localize. You understand the local markets. You possess locals, know local markets best. They have local networks, local knowledge, and so forth. And so it's very easy for them. Think of a multinational corporation. There's a new product, a new service that's supposed to be sold in the foreign country. And in the foreign country, then the foreign managers who are native of that country, they're host country nationals, they see the product, oh, this and that, oh yeah, or let us modify it in this and that way, and then our compatriots, people in our country, will also like it and would like to purchase it, and so you have a high degree of localization. That's a huge advantage. Also compared to ethnocentric approach, it would be much more cost efficient. We will talk more about compensation later. Expatriates can cost 3 times, 4 times, 5 times the amount of what a local would demand in terms of pay, particularly in developing countries. And I will give you some numbers later, not today, but in one of the later sessions. One of the challenges, or some of the challenges would be then you have limited knowledge exchange because you have decentralized autonomous units. The Spanish subsidiaries run in the Spanish way by Spaniards. The same would hold for Greece, America, blah, and so forth. And there's not so much coordination. There's not much coordination with the headquarters. There's not much coordination with the other subsidiaries. and then you will lose out some of the advantages that multinational corporations possess. Yeah? They can tap into different markets and different resources, but then you forfeit the opportunity to exchange that knowledge and to benefit. So that's one of the major problems. So there's limited exchange of knowledge, information, and also resources. Also in terms of talent pool, it's rather stays within certain countries instead of if you would like to create really global talent pools. Next approach would be region-centric. So that means we have organized the organization based on certain regions. There'll be European Union one region, Asia one region, and so forth, and everything is organized as such. And the talent is then drawn from anywhere within the region. That used to be also the case. Procter & Gamble did that in Europe. I'm not exactly sure now, but a couple of years ago, they said, oh yeah, we have the European Talent Program. And then any European from European Union country can apply, will become member of this talent pool, will assume higher leadership position, and can be easily rotated within Europe. So you create really strong Europe, regional competence. And that can also have all kinds of advantages. It doesn't matter then so much where you're from. You may also have some parent country nationals, but mostly you have host country or third country. If in Europe, and it's an American company in Europe, it doesn't matter if you're Spanish, German, Bulgarian, or whatever country you're from. It's considered as one market, and people can flow easily and become also top managers within the European region. Again, as before in the polycentric approach, I think one of the downsides is that then these people and these regions, they may not be so well coordinated. You develop very strong regional units, but the flow between might be limited. It's also not intended. So you create multiple areas and also duplications of people, and the talent pools might be also, again, on a regional basis only. So then the other approach now would be the geocentric approach, or transnational strategy is very often the aligning global strategy that relates to it. So the idea is you would try to draw knowledge and expertise from everywhere and combine it. And trying to be global responsive and also local responsive as well. It's somewhat challenging in terms of source of talent. Can be parent country nationals, host country national, third country national, it doesn't matter where you are. Simply the idea is you would like to hire and promote the best, regardless of nationality. That's the ideal. That would lead to diversity. You can easily tap and learn and combine different knowledge from different countries. That's one of the huge advantages. Also, you would develop global talent pools. That would be also very fair, regardless where you're from. Otherwise, in these ethnocentric or polycentric, that can lead also to some kind of perceived discrimination, unfairness, and so forth, which you do not have in such a geocentric approach. At the same time, the geocentric approach is also difficult to implement. It's challenging how you set same standards, trying to adapt to local demands, global standardization, which is very difficult to balance, to find a balance. It can also be costly, and it also requires a lot of coordination. So very often we see some tendencies. It's difficult to say, oh, there's one company follows very strictly, purely just one approach, but still most companies you can say, oh, that's mostly this or that kind of staffing. So here the point, just in general, strategy and staffing should be aligned, and usually is also aligned. If not at the moment, then over time it will adjust. So the next topic here, another influential factor for global staffing is the degree of internationalization, or the internationalization stages. We have here a figure. So on the one hand is here the involvement of how much the HR function and then also global staffing is involved in these different modes. In terms of stage one, it's a mostly domestic company, does a bit of exporting. In terms of global staffing, you don't need to make many adjustments because you do your business in your home market and you may occasionally export. And maybe you need to hire an export manager, You can also outsource it, so there's very limited implication for global staffing. Yeah, but the more companies internationalize, they globalize, yeah, also the more global staffing is demanded and needs to be taken into account. Starting with local sales subsidiaries in a foreign country, so meaning you have you open a shop, then you need to find people who will run the stores, you might have representative hours and so forth. Very often you would dispatch an expat. You will send a representative, because the person should also represent and oversee to some extent, to the foreign branch office, and then you would hire a few locals. So typically in China you have these representative offices, maybe one foreign manager and then 2, 3 secretaries, assistants, who are all locals. Or in a sales office, maybe you begin with sending an expat and then hiring locals who may eventually also be would replace then the expat later on. Licensing, franchising, that can be arranged very different ways. But still, typically, you do not get so much involved in the staffing if you license or franchise. It's rather a question of how you train people. So global staffing as whole, you would consider it, but in terms of recruiting or selection, doesn't play such an important role. Of course, you need to select very carefully with whom you team up, but that's more it is. So really interesting and complex it gets at stage 4 or 5. Stage 4 is when you set up your own subsidiary. You set up your own foreign subsidiary. Then you need to invest a substantial amount of money, and also need to staff then the whole subsidiary. And then how you staff the subsidiary is very much dependent on your global strategy. That determines then how you would staff the foreign subsidiary, and also how it evolves over time. And that we will discuss in a moment. Other very interesting cases are if you have some kind of collaboration. Different kinds of collaboration agreements could be a merger or acquisition. This merger, 2 companies become one. They merge, become one. Joint ventures, 2 companies, they form a 3rd company, and they both contribute some resources. And the 2 companies, they remain to exist, but they create a 3rd entity. Acquisition is one company buys another company and becomes one. But merger is something you combine on relatively equal terms. It's never equal, or almost never. It's typically 51.2 versus 48.8 or something like that. It's difficult also to make the evaluations. And then alliances, that can be all kinds of alliances. That can be just for one specific purpose very often. R&D alliance, they produce, if you stay in the car industry, maybe a new battery or electricity, e-car and so forth for one purpose, some alliance. Or it can also be on some other aspect. We have in the global airline industries, these alliances, Star Alliances, One World, and you call it. It's a very light alliance, so they don't fully integrate, but only certain business aspects. And very often with a specific purpose. And one major difference is also merger and acquisitions are meant forever. It's like a marriage. And like a marriage, it doesn't mean forever. It is meant to be, but it doesn't necessarily is the case. Joint venture and alliances, they don't have the intention to be forever together. And that's, I think, a difference. And also in alliances and joint venture, very often you have different perspectives. In a marriage, merger, acquisition, okay, you may have different perspectives, but the idea is you should align and have same. But in alliance and joint venture, it's very obvious. And business managers know that. They have different objectives. Take the example here of your example of China. German or Western car company and Chinese car company. They have clearly different objectives. The German company, they want to enter the market, gain market share. The Chinese partner, very often, they want to get the knowledge, the know-how from the German partner. So each has something the other wants. And that's why you combine and try to find some agreement how both can somewhat benefit. And joint venture, very often, after some time, one eats the other, or buys more shares, or there's some kind of dissolution, or one of the joint venture partner starts their own company or steals the knowledge and uses the knowledge in its own company. And that, I think, needs to be considered. And then staffing becomes really critical. Here, that's a very interesting part, market experience. The longer you operate in a market, that will affect how you staff people in that market. So the longer you stay, and if you now here, this is the linkage with global strategy. If global integration is very important to you, maybe at the beginning, you have host country nationals because they need to run the business. But over time, you would like to replace key personnel with your people. So you can really implement global strategy. So you have a change. Less reliance on host country nationals, because at the beginning in a foreign market, you don't know it. You have no other choice, but also to rely on host country nationals or locals or neighbors from that country. So in case of China, I know quite a few Japanese companies, they hire Taiwanese because they have lots of business with Taiwan and they can trust them to do business in China. But then over time, they don't need those locals, and they can also then rely maybe more on their own global talent. The interesting part, if you look here, I printed in bold. If it's localization, it's exactly the opposite trend. So meaning at the beginning, you may have expats, you need to transfer a bit of knowledge and so forth, but over time you would like to replace them because you want to localize. So over time you would then dispatch more, not dispatch, but you would like to use host country nationals. So very typical would be then their objective. So first you have some expats who will transfer the necessary knowledge from headquarters, how to produce, how to service, provide this and that service and so forth, and you would teach the locals how to do it. And then over time the locals can do it themselves. They don't need expats anymore. And maybe even you would send host country nationals to the headquarters also to learn and instill all the corporate values into them, and then you can withdraw the expats. The common trend nowadays is this approach, because very simple, it's more cost effective. And also locals may know the market better. But again, it also depends on your strategic objectives. Now, switching topic, government is also very important, it's very influential. It determines also your staffing. What can you do and what you want to do is very much dependent on the government regulations. And almost all governments impose some kind of regulations. Here we have an overview of potential restrictions. We have in many countries, you cannot simply hire a foreigner. Even if you want to hire an expat or a foreigner, you can't, because you need to provide a document of evidence. Oh, we need to hire this foreigner because there's no local who can do the job. The US, Korea, many countries have such kind of stipulations, which make it a bit cumbersome. It's still possible, but you need some extra documentation. And maybe they can also delay work permits, visa for the expat, for the spouse, all kinds of hassle. Or maybe even there might be quota, no more than this percentage for foreigners, or needs to be reserved for locals. Or also security clearance, or maybe even higher taxation, so all kinds of hassles that can be imposed by local governments. So according to WTO or some other agreements, that should not happen, but it does happen. It might impede the way of how you can staff your foreign operations. And there's also, on the other side, there's some incentives that are being offered by governments, financial and tax incentives. So I used to work in China and Korea as a foreigner, as a highly qualified foreigner. If you're an engineer or professor, I think for 5 years, you don't need to pay tax in China. It's really nice, free. You're okay. I'm not sure, 5 years, 3 years or something. In Korea it was 2 years, but still it's very nice. And some people do. 5 years I work in China, I earn a lot of money, and then I go to the next country. Netherlands has preferential tax agreements. I think they have a reduced tax rate, and there are all kinds of countries, because the idea is we want the foreigner, the highly qualified, to come, and they get incentives because the intention by the government is because we can learn from them. There's something we gain from them. That's why they get tax incentives, not because we are a happy family and it's a welfare state for everyone. There's a clear purpose behind. In case of Korea, there's no more tax incentive. Yeah, Korea is advanced, they've accumulated a lot of knowledge, they don't need it anymore, so there's no incentive. There might be also kinds of other state-provided skill enhancement of local HCNs, infrastructure. Yeah, I think China is still a very good example of how to attract foreigners and also locals into the country, in particular in terms of incentives, financial incentives. Also, if you're Chinese and you are highly qualified, more experienced, there are quite some opportunities there. And at least also great promises. And that's also one way of how they try to attract people. There was regulation. I mentioned already before, regulations determine also the opportunities and the way of doing business. And another important factor is also culture. Yeah, we had a dedicated session on culture. Here also culture is important. Some very basic concerns. Their cultural difference. Who do we select? So the Western paradigm is we select people based on their abilities and skills. At least we say so. Yeah? Also in Germany, that's not always what happens, but at least that's on the surface what we say. And nepotism, corruption, it's all illegal, and we would never do that. Yeah? We know it happens, yeah, but less so, and that is sanctioned. That's not desired. In some other cultures, East Asian cultures, for instance, very common age is important. Age and seniority. That determines who will be, when we will recruit, only at entry level and then promoted from within, yeah, and so forth. And then later also hierarchy, age is important, or seniority. And then also, nepotism sounds really harsh. Let's call it personal relationships. Yeah, personal relationships are important in business. Yeah, and personal relationships are also then important criteria in staffing. And that is being considered. And if I remember also my friends there, and they always say, oh yeah, he or she is the daughter, mother, father of this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that's why he or she is super important for us. Also, when I worked for Deutsche Bank, then my Deutsche Bank colleagues, they all told me, oh yeah, he's the German guy, and he married the princess of blah, blah, blah. And wow. And that's really good for business. Yeah, because wealth management, you need to connect to the rich people. If you have someone really important, yeah, part of your family, you can easily sell all kinds of money products, yeah, and saving plans to your family. And so you laugh, yeah, but there's even a business case behind, yeah, and personal relationships are important. Okay, and that varies, and you need to think what you do. Compliance-wise, Western companies need to comply with Western laws. Particularly America is super strict. And if you're being caught, this can have very severe damages. And we have punitive damages, so you have to be very careful to comply with your home country policies. That's important. But still, that is somewhat being considered. In particular, if you localize staffing. So if the local people hire locals, then they will also take more strongly local practices into consideration. And as a company, then you need to set your own boundaries to what extent you would like to forbid such kind of practice or try to intervene. Another aspect here are women and staffing. That's also, I think, a very important aspect. We have different cultural expectations across countries. We talked about Globe, Hofstede. Remember, we had the dimension of masculinity, femininity, gender egalitarianism, and so forth. And that varies across countries. Also here, look at some data. Labor force participation rate of women. Quite some, differences. Interesting. We have one student from Sweden. I saw her somewhere. Yeah, there she is. Sweden has among the highest labor participation rate of women, and also among the highest rate of pay of women, or lowest pay gap. Also the highest percentage of women in managerial roles, and so forth. So fairly gender egalitarian. This is in stark contrast to some of the other countries. Particularly Middle East, or here we have Japan. We have a very low participation rate of women in the workforce. In Japan, even here, we have to consider that among these women, that most of the women, they're not on managerial or permanent job positions. They have part-time jobs, yet they're included here. So the actual rate would be much lower. So there's a huge difference, men and women, in some countries. From a Western perspective, I think this is a great opportunity. And that's also what some companies do. We did a project on foreign subsidiaries in Japan. And some companies, for foreign companies, it's difficult to recruit locals in some countries because locals want to work for big local companies and not for a foreign, unknown, small company. Even though the company might be big overall and in its home country, but no one knows it in Japan, in whatever country. So it's difficult for foreign companies to hire people. And that's the opportunity then here to tap into labor segments which have been underutilized. And countries such as Japan, Korea, and also Germany still is lagging somewhat behind. That's an opportunity for foreign companies then to tap into exactly that market, segment of the labor market. So meaning they can hire highly qualified women in Japan and then also develop, promote them in their companies. Because Japanese companies are not so willing to promote them. Germany is also a different case because Germany also has lots of initiatives promoting women. So as a foreign company, it's not such a great opportunity. Still there is, but in other countries, you can really leverage that opportunity. Here we also have interesting data. Women, I think this was by Susan Shortland, I think where was it, Australia or US, the survey, that we already have almost parity here in terms of gender at general level up to middle level management. It's almost a parity, but if you look into expatriation, who are the expats, where are they from? There we have quite an unbalance. So we have mostly men and few women, 80% men, 20% women. Yeah, I mean, there are multiple factors. One is, as you mentioned, because of difficult host countries, foreign environments, they might be less receptive. It might be also here because of family issues. That is mostly imposed by the home country because they perceive it as such a problem. Also, another factor is also women themselves. So Susan, in her survey, she found that many women did not want to go, and so many factors. Overall, however, we do see some change. So more women go. Very interesting case is South Korea, a very masculine country, but they changed, particularly in the foreign affairs office, so diplomats and so forth. They only sent women abroad, for like 2-3 years ago, exclusively women because they wanted to promote women, and really setting quotas, 100% women only, really promoting more female expats and sharing this knowledge and so forth. So some of the reasons you mentioned, we still see some gap, slowly changing. It just takes time from all areas. So the idea is we would like to send more women expats, but it takes time. Then we also have individual and organizational reasons for global staffing, particularly if we think of sending people abroad. At the individual level, it can be very advantageous because you can learn new things abroad. And that can also, in the long run, not in the short run, result also in career advancement. So you can move up into higher positions, particularly if your companies more have this global strategy or transnational strategy, because that's then considered as an advantage. And for the organization also, it's very beneficial because it will promote learning, transfer of knowledge, sharing of knowledge, and so forth, eventually resulting also in superior organizational performance. And then we can also think of all kinds of situational factors. I think now I would like to proceed more quickly. So we can think of the nature and duration of the task, availability of financial resources at home and abroad, and depends also on the job. So if you look for technical workers, simple jobs, you don't want to send expats, you want to hire locals. Think of construction industry. If a German company builds a new hospital in Africa, they don't want to send German construction workers to Africa. Way too expensive. Doesn't make any sense. Financial resources are quite important when making also these decisions. After all, companies are profit-seeking entities, and that's very important. And HR, after all, is a cost function. Availability of qualified candidates. In some markets we don't have sufficient pool, so you need to send expats if possible, and if it's lower cost in your home country, you would hire host country nationals. And then last, also economic trends and conditions. So we talked about the example, Germany, US IT professionals. For German companies, if they think in long-term trends, that could be an opportunity to hire some of these available talents now.